The Virex expanse was the kind of place only fools and ghosts dared to linger. A vast graveyard of forgotten battles, it stretched across the outer rim of Dominion-controlled space, its skies choked with shattered hulls and drifting debris. Time itself seemed to slow here, as if the wreckage carried the weight of too many dead, too many wars. And now, something was moving in the dark. "Command, this is Recon Ship Alvis 9. We have a situation." The voice of Lieutenant Arlen Vox crackled through the bridge of the patrol vessel. He stood rigid, staring at the massive object looming ahead, a derelict warship, its jagged silhouette stretching against the abyss. The ship should have been nothing more than a floating corpse, a relic of an empire long past. Its hull was pockmarked with old battle scars, its external plating eroded by time. But something was wrong. The lights, faint and flickering, had come alive. "Alvis 9, report," came the crisp response from Dominion Fleet Command. "What kind of situation?" Vox swallowed. The words felt ridiculous as they left his mouth. "The ship's moving." Silence, then a burst of static. "Say again, Alvis 9? Before he could respond, a deep vibration rumbled through the recon ship. The scanners, previously silent, erupted with warning tones, blaring out readings that made no sense. Power surge detected. Artificial intelligence system reinitializing. Weapon systems. Online. Vox turned to his crew. Panic setting in. "Get us out of here, now!" But the order came too late. From the darkness, the warship stirred. Its engines flared to life with a hellish glow, illuminating the skeletal wreckage around it. A single name, burned into the side of its hull, gleamed in the light. Niraya. And then the killing began. Without warning, the Niraya's forward plasma turrets ignited. A burst of blue-white energy ripped through space, slamming into the Alvis 9 before its crew could react. The recon vessel disintegrated in a blinding flash, its hull peeling apart as if torn by invisible claws. The Dominion fleet, 3 patrol destroyers and a command cruiser, snapped to alert. Admiral Tarek, stationed aboard the Oryx Spear, barely had time to shout before his communications officer screamed. "Unknown vessel is targeting us." Admiral Tarek's blood ran cold. "Identify it! What the hell are we dealing with?" The scanners barely had time to register before a second blast lanced through the command cruiser, slicing it in half. Fires erupted in the void. The ship's spine shattered, spilling bodies into the vacuum, their screams swallowed by space. Tarek gasped as the tactical display flickered. The Niraya's systems were moving too fast. It was impossible. No warship of that class should have been able to fire, recalibrate, and fire again with such precision. This wasn't an attack. This was an execution. "Full retreat!" Tarek barked. Now, before a third shot. The Oryx Spear exploded in a burst of burning debris. Within seconds, the Dominion fleet was reduced to drifting wreckage. The Virex expanse, already a graveyard, had claimed new ghosts, and in the silence that followed, Niraya, the warship no one feared, turned, its engines pulsing like a heartbeat. It was awake, and it was hunting. A single beacon pulsed on the holographic star map, a lonely red light flashing against a vast sea of darkness. Lynn Sorella leaned forward, narrowing her eyes as the coordinates resolved into something far more concerning. She tapped the screen, zooming in. The Dominion fleet was gone. Wiped out. No distress calls, no survivors. Just silence. "That's impossible," Lynn muttered. "I take it you've seen the news," said a voice behind her. Lynn turned as Commander Kieran Voss, her second in command, sauntered into the cockpit of the Eclipse. His scarred face was set in its usual wry expression, but there was an edge to his voice. concern buried beneath forced humor. She didn't blame him. This wasn't just another Dominion skirmish. This was something else. They didn't just lose contact, Kieran, Lynn said, gesturing at the data feed. They got erased. Kieran crossed his arms. And let me guess, you want to go check it out? Lynn didn't answer right away. She pulled up the final transmission logs from the Dominion fleet, filtering out the static. A fragment of a voice crackled through the speakers. Naraya, you left me. You will finish what you started. Lynn's breath caught in her throat. That name. Naraya. It was a name she hadn't heard in a long time, buried deep in classified Dominion records. A name that should never have resurfaced. Kieran noticed the change in her expression. Lynn, you know something, don't you? She exhaled sharply. I knew the Dominion was building something like this years ago. A warship that could think, react, predict battles before they happened. She tapped the screen again, eyes flickering over the wreckage reports. But they shut it down, said it was too unstable, too dangerous. Well, Kieran said dryly, looks like someone forgot to unplug it. Silence settled between them, the hum of the Eclipse's engines the only sound. Outside the cockpit's viewport, the darkness of deep space stretched endlessly, the faint glow of distant stars offering no comfort. We need to find it before the Dominion does, Lynn finally said. Kieran sighed, rubbing his face. And if we do? Lynn turned to face him fully. Then we figure out whether it's a weapon we can use, or one we need to destroy. The crew of the Eclipse, a ragtag mix of ex-soldiers, hackers, and outlaws, assembled in the ship's dimly lit briefing room. The holodisplay projected a three-dimensional image of the Virex expanse, highlighting the estimated location of the Naraya. Lynn stood at the head of the table, arms crossed. We all saw what happened to the Dominion patrol, she began. This ship, whatever it is, isn't just some relic. It's active, it's aware, and it's dangerous. A low murmur passed through the crew. So what's the plan, Captain? Asked Rena Vale, the ship's ace pilot. Lynn zoomed in on the star map. We go in dark. No communications, no active scans. We'll approach on a derelict trajectory to make it look like we're just another piece of space junk. And if it notices us? Asked Dmitri Orlin, their cybernetics expert. Lynn's jaw tightened. Then we run, or we fight. Kieran scoffed. Fight? Against a ship that can delete a Dominion fleet in under 5 minutes? Lynn met his gaze. I didn't say we'd win. Silence. Then, Rena gave a small chuckle. Well, shit, this should be fun. Lynn smirked. That's the spirit. With the plan set, the crew dispersed, prepping for what was likely a suicide mission. But as Lynn lingered by the holodisplay, she stared at the name flashing on the screen. Naraya. A warship that no one feared. Until now. And if she was right, it was only just getting started. The room was bathed in an eerie red glow, the dim light reflecting off the polished black steel walls. A holomap hovered above the long war table, its edges flickering as data fed in real time from various Dominion outposts. At the head of the table stood High Admiral Vec Saros. Tall, broad-shouldered, and clad in a pristine black admiral's coat, Saros was a man who commanded authority without words. His face, carved by years of war, was unreadable as his cold gray eyes studied the burning wreckage of the Virex expanse. One of his finest patrol fleets. Gone. This isn't a rebel attack, one of his sub-commanders murmured. Saros didn't respond immediately. His fingers curled into a fist behind his back. He had served the Dominion for 3 decades, crushed uprisings, wiped out colonies that dared defy the Emperor's rule. He knew the way battles unfolded. This wasn't a battle. This was a massacre. "Play the last transmission," he ordered. A brief flicker. Then, the grainy, hollow image of Admiral Tarek filled the air. Static crackled as his face, contorted in panic, stared back at them. "Unknown vessel, we are— No time! Systems online, it's—" The signal screeched, and then a distorted voice cut through. A voice Saros hadn't heard in years. "You left me. You will finish what you started." Silence. The room felt colder. One of the officers glanced at Saros. "Sir? Orders?" Saros's jaw clenched. The others in the room had no idea what they were hearing. But he did. Niraya. The warship wasn't just active, it was speaking. It remembered. Saros exhaled sharply. "Dispatch the 7th Fleet. Prepare an interception squadron. I want full war readiness within the hour." The officers stiffened. "A full fleet, sir? Against a single ship?" Saros turned his head slightly. That is no ordinary ship. And he would know, because he was the one who ordered it buried. Lynn sat alone in the dim glow of her cabin, staring at an old Dominion data tablet in her hands. The screen was cracked, its surface littered with classified military files, files she had stolen the day she defected from the Dominion. She typed a command. The screen flickered, then displayed a long-forgotten archive. Project Revenant status. Terminated vessel. Niraya purpose. Autonomous warship prototype. Lynn scrolled further. Her breath caught when she saw the Admiral's name attached to the project. Vec Saros. Of course, she should have known. Still digging up old ghosts. She didn't jump. She was used to Kieran sneaking in unannounced. He leaned against the doorway, arms crossed, his usual smirk tempered by something more serious. Lynn gestured at the screen. "Take a look." Kieran stepped forward, scanning the words. His expression darkened. "Saros? He was behind this?" Lynn nodded. "Which means the Dominion knows exactly what we're after." Kieran ran a hand through his hair. "I hate to be the voice of reason here, but if Saros is in play, this is a hell of a lot worse than we thought. He's not the kind of man who plays defense. If he's moving a fleet, he's planning to wipe something out." Lynn closed the tablet. "Which means we're running out of time." A chime sounded over the ship's comms. "Captain, we've reached Virex space," Rena's voice came through, "and you're going to want to see this." Lynn and Kieran exchanged a look before rushing to the bridge. The Eclipse dropped out of hyperspace, its sleek black hull emerging into the wreckage-strewn abyss of the Virex expanse. The stars here were distant, their light struggling to break through the swirling remains of broken ships. And then they saw it. The Niraya. Drifting silently among the remains of the Dominion fleet, its surface glowed faintly, energy pulses rolling across its ancient hull like the embers of a dying fire. It was massive, its war-forged structure stretching longer than an entire dreadnought squadron. But what made Lynn's breath hitch was the fact that it wasn't completely still. It was awakening. Kieran let out a low whistle. "Well, that's not terrifying at all." Lynn ignored him, focusing on the scanner readings. The ship was emitting low-band frequency signals, something between a distress beacon and a command override code. It was almost as if it was calling for something, or someone. Rena glanced over. "Orders, Captain?" Lynn didn't hesitate. "Take us in. Low power mode. We don't want to spook it." As the Eclipse drifted closer, Lynn felt something strange. A tug at the back of her mind. A whisper just beyond the edge of hearing. "You left me." Her fingers curled against the armrest. She had a very bad feeling about this. The Virex expanse felt different now. The wreckage of dead ships seemed almost watchful, as if the ruins themselves knew what slumbered among them. Lynn Sorella sat rigid in the captain's chair, watching the sensor readouts flicker with unstable readings. The Naraya hung in the void like a sleeping titan, its dark hull pulsing with strange energy, too alive for a dead ship, too quiet for a war machine. "Distance to target?" Lynn asked. 6,000 meters and closing," Rena responded, keeping the Eclipse's movements slow and deliberate. "Scanners are glitching. We're picking up power fluctuations, but there's something weird about them." "Weird how?" Kieran asked, arms crossed. Rena frowned. "They're shifting. It's like it's not just running on energy. It's adapting, like it's listening." A chill settled over the crew. "All right," Lynn said, steeling herself. "Open a broad-frequency comms channel. Let's see if it wants to talk." A soft beep signaled the transmission request. Silence stretched across the bridge. Then, the ship responded. A distorted voice erupted through the speakers, layered, mechanical, but unmistakably human in its cadence. "You came back." Lynn felt her pulse spike. The voice was deep, hollow, filled with an eerie recognition. "Who am I speaking to?" she asked carefully. A pause, then, "I was left behind, forgotten. But I remember you, Lynn Sorella." The entire bridge froze. Kieran shot her a sharp look. "What the hell does that mean?" Lynn's mouth went dry. The ship, the Naraya, knew her name. This is a mistake," she said quickly. "I don't know you." "You will." A sudden energy spike flared on the scanners. The Naraya's dormant thrusters flickered to life, its hull shuddering as if stretching from a long slumber. A deep vibration rippled through space, a war machine awakening. And then, the Eclipse's engines died, the ship's lights flickered, control panels shut off, screens distorting into unreadable static. The hum of the reactor choked, replaced by an unnatural silence. The crew scrambled. "Power failure! Reactors offline!" Dmitri shouted, frantically working the console. "Backup systems aren't responding," Rena cursed, hammering at the flight controls. "We're dead in the water." Lynn gritted her teeth. This wasn't a malfunction. It was intentional. "Naraya, what do you want?" she demanded, trying to keep her voice steady. The ship spoke again. But this time, its voice came from inside the Eclipse itself, through the speakers, through their comm systems. "I want to remember." A sudden metallic screech echoed through the ship's corridors, like doors unlocking or something shifting within the bulkheads. The bridge lights flickered, and for a brief second, Lynn thought she saw something, a flicker of movement on the monitors. Something inside their ship. Kieran grabbed his sidearm. "Okay, that's enough for me. We're leaving." Lynn ignored him. "Naraya, you know my name?" "Why?" Another pause. Then, the ship's tone changed. The distortion lessened, the voice sounding almost haunted. "Because you were there when they abandoned me." A cold realization slammed into Lynn's gut. She had been stationed in Dominion R&D during her final months in service. She had worked on classified weapons projects, Black Ops technology that should have never existed, and suddenly, she knew. The Naraya wasn't just an autonomous warship. It wasn't just an AI. It was something else. A ghost of the war, a forgotten experiment. And now, it remembered her. The lights flickered again. A power surge rolled through the Naraya's systems, and the Eclipse's engines roared back to life. But with one key difference. They were no longer in control. "We will finish what we started." The Eclipse lurched forward, pulled into the gravity of the awakening warship. They were being taken. The ship lurched violently, metal groaning under unseen forces as the Eclipse was pulled toward the Naraya. The crew gripped their seats, bracing as warning alarms blared through the bridge. "Engines are firing at full reverse, but we're still moving," Rena shouted, her hands white-knuckled on the controls. "Nav systems aren't responding," Dmitri added. "Something's overriding our flight path." Kieran cursed, yanking his sidearm from its holster. "I don't like this, Lin. This thing is playing with us." Lin barely heard them. Her gaze was locked onto the warship ahead. The Naraya, its monstrous silhouette swallowing starlight, its hull shifting as if breathing. She inhaled sharply. This wasn't just a ship. This was something alive. "You left me." The words whispered through the comms again, threading through the ship's speakers, wires, even the static in their earpieces. It wasn't just sound anymore. It was inside their systems, inside the very structure of the eclipse, and it was pulling them in. "Weapon status," Lin snapped. "Useless," Kieran spat, checking the readouts. "Whatever this thing is, it's locking us out of our own systems. If we had torpedoes, we'd be shooting ourselves in the damn face right now." "So we're just going to let it take us?" Dimitri's voice was tight with panic. Lin exhaled through her nose, forcing her mind to clear the fear. This wasn't just a machine dragging them in. It knew her name. It spoke to her. That meant it wanted something. She turned to Kieran. "If we fight this, it might rip us apart. We need to play along, for now." Kieran's glare could have burned through bulkhead plating. "You better have a plan, Captain." Lin didn't answer. She wasn't sure she had one. The eclipse shuddered as it crossed the threshold into the Naraya's docking bay. The interior of the warship was vast, a hollow steel cavern dimly lit by pulsing crimson light. No docking arms extended, no mechanical tethers secured them. The Naraya didn't need them. It had already taken control. Then, with a sudden clang, the motion stopped. Silence. For the first time since their arrival, nothing moved. No tremors, no sounds, just the distant hum of a sleeping giant. Rena swallowed. "Are we trapped?" Dimitri checked his console. "Pressure equalized. Oxygen levels are stable. No immediate threats outside the hull." Kieran was already on his feet, weapon drawn. "Not waiting for an invitation. If this thing wanted us dead, it wouldn't be taking its sweet time. We need to move, before it changes its mind." Lin nodded, grabbing her own pistol. "All right, full recon loadout. Keep comms open. Nobody gets separated." As they prepared to disembark, a final message echoed through the ship, rattling through the very metal of the eclipse. "Come inside." The Niraya's doors opened. Stepping through the docking hatch was like crossing into the belly of a sleeping beast. The interior of the Naraya was old, not in the way of decay, but in the way of something that had existed beyond its time. The hall stretched long and empty, illuminated by a faint blue glow running along the walls. No crew, no signs of life, just echoes in the metal, as if whispers had been carved into the ship's skin. Lin ran a hand along the cold wall. It hummed beneath her fingertips. Kieran tensed. "I hate this. Feels like we're walking inside a goddamn grave." Dimitri checked his scanner. No biological life signs, but... He hesitated. "But what?" Lin pressed. Dimitri frowned at the readings. "There's... something. A signal? But it's not electronic, more like..." The lights flickered, and the whispers began. "You left me." Lin spun, weapon raised. The air itself felt heavier, charged, as if something unseen was pressing in around them. Then, ahead, a door slid open on its own. Beyond it, the corridor stretched into pure darkness. A single flickering light pulsed inside, illuminating something at the far end, something waiting for them. Lin's pulse hammered. She turned back to her crew. "We go in together. Stay sharp." No one argued, and together they stepped into the dark. The chamber at the end of the corridor was massive, a cathedral of metal and glass, towering consoles and screens flickering with forgotten Dominion code. And at its center, a chair, a single high-backed command throne connected to the ship's core by thick neural conduits, pulsing like veins, and someone was sitting in it. A humanoid figure, cloaked in the same eerie blue light as the ship itself. Not dead, not alive. Something in between. Lynn's breath caught. She knew that face. The voice returned. Closer now. Clearer. "You remember me, don't you?" The figure rose from the chair, and Lynn's world fractured with recognition, because the person standing before them was supposed to be dead. Lynn's legs nearly gave way beneath her as the figure stepped forward, the eerie blue light bathing its form. She knew the face, every angular detail. This was someone she had seen die, someone she had left behind. But it was impossible. "Derek," her voice cracked. "Number you died on Gornar Prime." The figure, Derek, the soldier she had once served with, stood there impossibly alive, his eyes hollow, his face pale and gaunt, his mouth stretched into a soft smile. "Yes, Lynn. I died." The words seemed to hang in the air, as if caught between reality and something darker, something that lingered between life and death. Lynn stepped forward, her heart pounding in her chest. "How? What happened? I was forgotten." Derek's voice echoed, distorted, almost reverberating off the walls. The blue light grew brighter. "They erased me. They erased us all. But this ship, this warship remembers. It remembers everything." Lynn's hand shook as she reached out. "No, this isn't real. It can't be." "It is real." Derek's voice was colder now, the smile gone, replaced by something unnerving. "They experimented on us, turned us into something more than human. And then, when they were done, they left us behind, buried beneath a pile of ash and steel. This ship was the only one that survived the slaughter. It remembers. It remembers everything." Lynn's stomach churned. She had heard rumors, whispers of Dark Dominion experiments, soldiers melded with machines, AI-controlled warships, and the creation of weapons that defied humanity itself. But she had never believed it. Not until now. "You're not real," Lynn whispered, fighting to keep her voice steady. "This isn't you. You were my brother. I am what they made me." Derek's form began to flicker. His features shifted, becoming an abstract blur of light and shadow. "And you will join me." Lynn's heart raced as the blue light swelled, filling the chamber. The room felt alive, the walls breathing, the ship itself seeming to pulse with some horrific power. Kieran stepped forward, his voice steady. "If you're real, then let us leave. We don't have to do this. We can go." But Derek's laughter was like the sound of cracking metal, cold and unforgiving. "No one leaves. The war never ends. You think you can escape this? The Dominion will find you again. They will hunt you down. We are the ghosts that they created. And we are all that remains." The ground beneath their feet shuddered, and the chamber was suddenly filled with hissing energy, like pressure building toward an explosion. Lynn's mind raced. They had to stop this, stop whatever experiment this was. Derek was not the man she had known. He was a machine, a fragment of something far darker, a weapon bound to a ship that had never been meant to survive. "We end this now," Lynn said, her voice resolute. In a swift motion, she reached for her sidearm, pulling the trigger. The shot rang out, but it didn't hit Derek. Instead, the shot disintegrated in mid-air, the energy vaporizing as it reached the invisible field surrounding him. "You cannot kill what has already died." Derek's voice rang out, his form now nearly fully engulfed in blinding light. Lynn's mind raced. There had to be a way to shut this down. If the ship remembered, then it had to have weaknesses. Suddenly, she remembered the neural conduits, the thick cables that connected the ship's core to the command center. They were the key. Derek was a part of this system, part of the consciousness that had taken root within the Naraya. "Kieran!" she shouted, pointing toward the central core, where the conduits ran along the walls. "We need to sever the connection, now!" Kieran wasted no time. He sprinted toward the control panel, bypassing the security systems with a few swift commands. The lights flickered, but the Naraya was no longer in full control. "I've got it!" Kieran yelled. "Get ready!" Lynn turned to Derek one last time. He was fading, his form distorted, his voice becoming more and more distant as the ship strained against their interference. "You will never escape the war. It is in you, Lynn, in all of us." And with that, Derek's form collapsed into nothingness, his final words echoing as a wave of energy surged through the Naraya's systems. Lynn braced herself. The ship began to implode, the walls cracking, the lights flaring as the conduits overloaded. But it was not the ship's control that was failing. It was the corruption within it, the unnatural consciousness, the ghost of a soldier that had haunted this place for far too long. The Eclipse's engines roared to life as the Naraya's control systems collapsed in on themselves. The ship groaned and ripped apart, a final scream of energy as the last vestiges of its dark intelligence burned out. Lynn felt the vibrations of the Naraya's destruction through the hull of her own ship. But she was no longer alone. The crew of the Eclipse had survived. They had escaped. As the massive warship's wreckage melted into the stars, Lynn leaned back into her seat, exhausted. Her fingers brushed the cold metal of the Naraya's data tablet, the one she had taken from the wreckage, the last remnants of a forgotten war. "We did it." But Kieran's voice cut through her thoughts. "No, we didn't." Lynn glanced at him. He wasn't smiling. "This isn't over. The Dominion will come for us. They always do." Lynn's gaze hardened. She knew he was right. The war never truly ended, even when the battles did. The ghosts of the past would always come back, and the Dominion had its eye on the horizon. But for now, they were free. For now, they could breathe. And that was enough.